Good morning and welcome to our gathering. This is the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Stockton. We're glad you have joined us and hope you will find here what you are seeking. We are a community of individuals holding many different beliefs, coming from many different places, each progressing on our own journeys of life and faith. We join together in our commitment to care for humanity and in our effort to shape a better, healthier, more accepting, more inclusive, and more hopeful world. We promise to accept and encourage all those persons of goodwill who gather here, recognizing that we all continue to grow and learn throughout our lifetimes. We especially welcome and stand with LGBTQ plus persons, even as we seek to welcome all persons of every age, ability, status, color, and ethnicity. We strive to make our community a place of peace and acceptance, love, and nurture, even as we challenge ourselves and others to live more faithfully according to the values of Unitarian Universalism. Our children's program is soon to be back to a fuller part, but Michaela is here in case any kids do come in, and she usually sits in the fireside room. So if any families come in with children, let them know that she is here, and kids can go out if needed. We are asking that people continue to wear masks unless they are up here in front or at the piano, just to be on the safe side, though the restrictions are being lifted and the situation is seemingly much better. We anticipate at this point that unless there's another turnaround, we'll restart the children's program and coffee hour on April 3rd. So we're getting there.
A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come, when man and woman may regard one another as brother and sister, able both to appreciate and to prophesy to one another. A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come. What woman needs is not as a woman to act or rule, but as a nature to grow, as an intelligence to discern, as a soul to live freely and unimpeded, to unfold such powers as were given her. A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come. Man does not have his fair share either. His energies are repressed and distorted by the interposition of artificial obstacles. A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come. We would have every arbitrary barrier thrown down. We would have every path laid open to woman as freely as to man. Were this done, we believe a divine energy would pervade nature to a degree unknown in the history of former ages. A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come. And those are the words of Margaret Fuller. I'd like to invite Emily Boyd to come forward now as we light our chalice, and all of us will be reading together the chalice lighting words in our order of service. We light our chalice this day for all the women who have struggled for peace and justice throughout history. And now let's do our words of affirmation. And with this side, try to be the children. And then this side, we are the adults, okay? All right. Children, begin.
We believe in love.
Love is the only doctrine of this church.
We believe in truth.
And the quest for truth is our sacrament.
We believe in helping others.
And service is our prayer.
We believe in the sacredness of life.
To dwell together in peace, seek knowledge and freedom, serve humanity in fellowship, and cherish the earth and its creatures. This do we covenant, each with the other. The story today is Playing to Win, the story of Althea Gibson. Some of us remember her as children and how she played tennis. It is by Karen Deans and illustrated by Elbright Brown. When Althea Gibson was born in 1927, few would have imagined she was destined for greatness. She was the first child of poor sharecroppers living in South Carolina. Her parents worked hard trying to scratch out a living on a cotton farm. And each summer they raised 5 acres of cotton in exchange for a place to live, which was nothing more than a small cabin. As sharecroppers, they were given part of the cotton they farmed, and they sold it to buy just enough food and clothing to get by. Times were not good for the Gibson family. When Althea was 3, she was sent north to an aunt in New York City, and then, years later, to another aunt in Philadelphia. And when she was 9, her parents finally were able to move to New York City, and the family settled into an apartment in Harlem. At least Althea was together with her parents, her 3 little sisters, and her brother. But in the 1930s, life in Harlem was tough on kids trying to grow up. Crime was everywhere, and people were poor. Althea was becoming wild. She was either fighting with other kids or skipping school. Sometimes Althea, who loved movies, would play hooky all day in the movie theater. Don't listen to this, Nathaniel. No matter how hard her parents tried, they couldn't keep Althea in line. She had a restless, determined spirit that hadn't found a good way to express itself yet. Gee, I wonder where she will learn to express herself. When she was 13, she realized she loved to play ball, any kind of ball. Instead of fighting, she started bowling, playing basketball, and paddle tennis. She found she was happiest when she was competing in sports, and she was good at just about anything she tried. When she was 14 years old, a grown-up friend recognized how talented she was at paddle tennis, and he gave her a used tennis racket, and thinking that she might become interested in the real tennis game. And she was. She was a natural. During the 40s, tennis was a game played mostly by wealthy white people. The country clubs that had tennis courts would not let black people play. Fortunately for Althea, there was a tennis club for African Americans in New York City. It was there that Althea began playing tennis, entering tournaments, and winning matches. But even when she was having success on the tennis courts, she was still having trouble in school. She felt that it was just a waste of time. She'd rather be on the courts playing tennis. And play tennis she did. There was an African American tennis league called the American Tennis Association that held tournaments throughout the year. In 1947, at the age of 20, she won 10 straight tournaments. She was a champion in the black tennis community, and people were noticing her talent. But she wanted more competition. She dreamed of playing in the famous United States Lawn Tennis Association. Well, the only problem was the officials made it difficult for African Americans to participate. They were not banned from the league, but the championship matches were held at country clubs where they were not allowed. Luckily, there were people who really cared about her, and she went to live in North Carolina at a doctor friend's family home. She finished high school, and she played tennis on his private court, but it was difficult for her to live in the South. In North Carolina, she was forced to sit in the back of the bus because of her skin color. And in those days, black people were discriminated against openly in the South, and this made Althea feel terrible. Though she longed to be in the North again, she went on to college at Florida A&M, an all-black college where she was offered a scholarship to play tennis. There she began competing in tournaments against white players, and in 1950, she qualified to play in the U.S. National Tennis Championships at Forest Hills, the most important tennis tournament in the United States. She was the first African American allowed to play there. She lost against a top-ranked player, but she had broken down a barrier. People took her seriously. She was a contender. For the next few years, she continued to play in tournaments, but didn't do well. She lost her confidence. A friend coached her and encouraged her to play like a champion. He happened to be a taxi driver, too, this friend. But she just needed that encouragement. But she got a break. In 1955, I find this very interesting, the United States government asked Althea to become a Goodwill ambassador as part of a traveling tennis team. The team of 2 men and 2 women journeyed around the world playing tennis. It was the best thing that could have happened to Althea's career. It allowed her to play lots of tennis while touring Southeast Asia, and she saw many sights, met people, had fun, and improved her game. In 1956, on her way back to the United States, she stopped in Paris, France, and she got in the French Championships, the third most important tennis tournament in the world. She won the tournament and became the first African American ever to win a major tennis championship. But now she aimed to win at Wimbledon in England and Forest Hills in the United States. In 1956, she entered and lost those tournaments, but she did not lose hope. She had gone further than any African American tennis player in history, but she didn't believe she had gone far enough. She wanted to be #1 in the world. She had the physical skill, but something was holding her back. She continued to play that year, traveling to Australia and Asia for a series of tournaments. But she wasn't winning the way she wanted to. And on her return to the States, she decided it was time for her to win at Wimbledon and Forest Hills. And in 1957, she was going to make that happen. She won Wimbledon and received the trophy from the Queen, and I have to show this picture. So, can you imagine how she felt at this event? And a few weeks later, she won the United States tournament at Forest Hills. She was ranked #1 in the world. And just to make sure that if anybody had doubts about her title, she won the same awards the next year. Althea Lick Gibson loved to play tennis. She became #1 by playing hard and never giving up, even during the tough times. She gladly accepted the help of supportive friends and graciously acknowledged their contributions to her career. Whatever Althea did to break down racial barriers in tennis, she did the only way she knew how. She played tennis like nobody's business. And I want to add here, she obviously, as not just tennis players, but lawyers and judges, as a black woman, she became the role model for other girls, little African American girls, to see that they too could make it. And today we have superstars Venus and Serena Williams. But Althea Gibson was the first. Now would you open your hymnals to the back to number 573, responsive reading. And it is the Mother's Day Proclamation by Julia Ward Howe. I will start with the regular font, and then you respond in the slanted spot, italicized. Arise then, women of this day.
Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of fears.
Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies.
Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage, for caresses and applause.
Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience.
We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs.
From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm.
The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence indicate possession.
As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council.
Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead.
Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as the means whereby the great human family can live in peace.
And each bearing at her own time The sacred impress, now to Caesar. A voice on the court. The nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson. The nomination of U.S. Circuit Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the U.S. Supreme Court fulfills one of President Joe Biden's campaign promises, but it also is the first nomination of a black woman in the 233-year history of the court. It has been a long time coming, bringing a needed voice to the court that has so far been served by 108 white men, 2 black men, 4 white women, and 1 Hispanic woman. Justice Thurgood Marshall, nominated by President Lyndon Johnson in 1967, was the first black man on the court. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, nominated by President Ronald Reagan in 1981, was the first woman on the court. Though this sermon is really intended to laud the nomination of Judge Jackson, as a straight white male, I've chosen to exercise my historical prerogative to make the story all about me, at least for a moment. As an introverted, thoughtful, 3rd or 4th generation European American male of Hungarian, German, English, Irish, Scotch, and French ancestry, of Jewish, Catholic, and Methodist religious heritage, I've frequently found myself without a place at the table. However, as a white male, I have also frequently found that I could have a place at the table on any matter that was really important to me. If there were times I felt more on the outside as a philosophical religious humanist, it was relatively easy to admit that my place was claimed or not by my own choice, far more often than I was excluded because of any characteristic of ethnicity, color, or gender. The same cannot be said of the numerous acts, orders, laws, and practices of exclusion that have long been suffered by women, blacks, and other persons of color, and LGBTQ+ persons. I therefore hereby yield my historical straight white male prerogative. Judge Jackson will hopefully be the first black woman to have a voice on the U.S. Supreme Court. It would be nicer if it were not within a 3 to 6 progressive minority, but her personal and judicial history allows her to bring a voice never before heard, but much needed within the halls of the High Court. Before coming to the U.S. Circuit Court, Jackson served as a U.S. District Judge in Washington for 8 years, and prior to that as a public defender and on the U.S. Sentencing Commission. She also clerked for Justice Breyer. She's a graduate of Harvard and Harvard Law and extraordinarily qualified to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court, according to Donna Brazil, adjunct professor at Georgetown and the King Endowed Chair in Public Policy at Howard University, former interim chair of the DNC and its Voting Rights Institute, and manager of Al Gore's presidential campaign in 2000. WhiteHouse.gov says this about Judge Jackson. Judge Jackson was born in Washington, D.C. and grew up in Miami, Florida. Her parents attended segregated primary schools, then attended historically black colleges and universities. Both started their careers as public school teachers and became leaders and administrators in the Miami-Dade public school system. When Judge Jackson was in preschool, her father attended law school. In a 2017 lecture, Judge Jackson traced her love of the law back to sitting next to her father in their apartment as he tackled his law school homework, reading cases and preparing for Socratic questioning. Well, she undertook her preschool homework, coloring books. Judge Jackson stood out as a high achiever throughout her childhood. She was a speech and debate star who was elected mayor of Palmetto Junior High and student body president of Miami Palmetto Senior High School. But like many black women, Judge Jackson still faced naysayers. When Judge Jackson told her high school guidance counselor that she wanted to attend Harvard, the guidance counselor warned that Judge Jackson should not set her sights so high. That did not stop Judge Jackson. She graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University, then attended Harvard Law School, where she graduated cum laude and was editor of the Harvard Law Review. Judge Jackson lives with her husband Patrick and their 2 daughters in Washington, D.C. Members of her family have been teachers and police officers. Because of her diverse and broad public service, Judge Jackson has a unique appreciation of how critical it is for the justice system to be fair and impartial. With multiple law enforcement officials in her family, she also has a personal understanding of the stakes of the legal system. According to the Federal Judicial Center, only 70 black women have been federal judges in American history, less than 2% of those who have served. There wasn't a single black female federal judge until 1966, when President Johnson nominated Constance Baker Motley to the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York in Manhattan. Before nominating Judge Jackson, President Biden had nominated 11 black women to federal judgeships. As blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, and other persons of color, women, and LGBTQ plus persons know only too well from U.S. history, to be without a voice as various courts decide your fate and that of your children can be a risk to money, property, relationships, freedom, and even to life. High national ideals and marketing aside, this nation has not afforded persons of color, women, and LGBTQ plus persons the same protections and justice as that received by white men, especially those with wealth and power. Whites are rarely convicted for many crimes that frequently earn persons of color life sentences. Persons of color without financial resources may sit in jail for years awaiting trial on relatively minor offenses. The judicial system rarely provides equal justice for all persons. Judge Jackson has stated that she loves this nation and she loves the Constitution, but her most important role may be in describing to her colleagues how often injustices and inequality are and have been allowed. No matter how well qualified and effective Judge Jackson has been, it is not fair to place upon her head all the hopes and dreams of progressives for change in the justice system and the nation. That she will make a difference is a virtual certainty, but there are many persons, groups, and the majority of a now very conservative and partisan court aligned against her. Against such a lineup, the impact of her service will likely take time to see. She will hopefully sit on the court for decades and be a strong voice for justice over all that time. In the more immediate future, if she can heighten the awareness of the other justices as to the needs of the poor and persons of color, she may be able to moderate harsh decisions we might expect from the conservative side of the court. The work of the Supreme Court is tremendously important, as we have seen in several recent decisions, but the court can only deal with the cases presented to it. The problems of society include multiple levels of action or inaction before any case is brought to the High Court. And many laws within states may not have been covered in the Constitution or its list of amendments. Other matters may already be so entrenched in previous decisions that overturning settled law may cause more harm than good. Great wisdom is expected and required of Supreme Court justices, in addition to significant study of the Constitution and related laws. The work of the High Court is hardly for the faint of heart. And like even some of Solomon's decisions, not everyone will be happy with the decisions rendered. The beginnings of Unitarian and Universalist religion in America was developing out of the same Enlightenment energy that inspired Jefferson and other founders of our nation. Universalists were among the first to voice opposition to slavery and the slave trade. Unitarians and Universalists have long voiced support for equality and justice for all persons, though white men have long provided most of the leadership for our movements, as for our country. Within our religion and within our nation, changes that include women and persons of color have been hard won and too long in coming. Only now, in our third century, are we beginning to see the fruits of change. And even now, there are naysayers and critics aplenty. Our voices are needed now more than ever in support of leadership by women and persons of color. We have yet to have a woman elected president of the nation, nor a black woman to lead Unitarian Universalism. We have made progress, but it has been far too slow. One of the great risks to holding back the women and minorities who are ready to lead is that the revolution may become violent, as energies intended for good may be turned toward more destructive means. White men have clutched power and wealth so tightly that many within our nation are actively seeking change and are suspicious of the motivations of any men who happen to be white. There's a tremendous energy among the poor and minorities that is ready to be unleashed in perhaps even more violent ways if further injustices are perpetrated by the white men in power in politics, businesses, and carrying a badge. Diffusing those energies will not come by harsher sentences or greater restrictions. Only real justice is likely to make a difference. If Judge Jackson can help to ensure progress in real justice, it may make a huge difference. As Judge Jackson begins the confirmation process, the world is in the midst of at least two crises never before faced to the current extent. Russia, a nuclear power in Europe, is waging what appears to be approaching all-out war against a young democracy in Ukraine, without any justification beyond an effort to rebuild an empire for Putin. The ecological crisis is now bringing most of the scientifically predicted changes in rapidly rising sea levels, intensified storms, greater impacts of floods, drought, fires, and worsening impacts of pollution in the ocean and waterways, and decreasing air quality, especially near factories and power plants. These two crises, paired with the current logjam blocking any serious progress in a narrowly divided Congress, makes these times inauspicious at best. Many authors and societal commentators over the last century or so have argued for incrementalism in bettering the situation of blacks, women, and minorities in our society. But the world of today is in need of massive changes if humanity is to survive the current century. Oligarchs in Russia are currently being targeted for sanctions, but American corporations and the super rich who own them are still enjoying the latest trillions in cutbacks of taxes accomplished by Trump and the GOP. The wealthy need to pay a fair share, and corporations need to be held accountable for the damages they have caused. Judge Jackson may help that to happen in the long run, but it will take the rest of us to make a difference in the short run. Our society and the world can change if the people will stand up to the abuse of power by wealthy elites and dictators. The people of Ukraine have absolutely been making a difference in slowing down Putin's forces. Whether they can hold out long enough to make Putin back off is unknown. We need to stand up in this country and prevent Trump from escaping accountability and regaining the White House. I continue to hope that justice will prevail here and in Ukraine and around the world. Courageous and principled women like Judge Jackson help to give me hope. Our UU principles call us to work for justice and equity in our congregations, our movement, in society at large, and across the global community. We are all connected in an interdependent and interconnected web of existence. Whatever small difference we each make in making things better will echo throughout the web. We each need to do all that we can, and that will have to be enough. May Judge Jackson quickly be confirmed to the service for which she is so clearly so well fitted. Shalom, salam, blessed be, namaste, and amen. May this congregation always be dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there's a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity. May the stars carry your sadness away. May the sunflowers fill your heart with beauty. May hope forever wipe away your tears, and above all, may love make you strong. Go out and help build a better world. Go out in peace. Go out and make justice. Amen.